back in 1985, I got a job doing inventory of drugstores, department stores, things like that. And I had been working there a few weeks, and we went around the country, doing different stores. So we went to Virginia first, and when we weren't doing the stores, we had to find things to do, and I love to read. So Stephen King the paperback of Pet Cemetery had just come out, so I bought it, and I read it, and then we played poker and stuff like this. So a lot of people will save their pennies to play penny poker, and I was only 18, so they tried to get me into the bars with them, but it didn't work. They wanted ID, so I'd sit and read while they went to the bars. But we was in Virginia a couple weeks, and then we went back home to Indiana for a few days, and then we was going to head out to Denver, Colorado to do some stores out there, but we had to stop in Illinois for a couple days and do a few stores there. So and when I started working there, me and this guy hit it off pretty quick, and so we became boyfriend girlfriend pretty quick. He was like 21, so he was a few years older than me. But anyway, when we got, February 4th, we were done with the stores in Illinois. We were going to head out to Colorado, and the next day was one of the girls with us' birthday. So we did the stupid thing and bought a bunch of liquor, and I'm not gonna lie, we for an hour or two we did drink some of that liquor and got a pretty good buzz going. And the person that was driving wouldn't drink, but there was 8 of us in the van, so we was partying pretty good. We bought her a cake and all this stuff, and had all our luggage in the back and all this stuff. We was heading out. And the last thing I remember was we were going out of Omaha, Nebraska. We had stopped drinking hours before, but the last thing I remember, we were going out of Omaha, and there was a cooler in between the front driver's seats of the van, and it was warm in the van, so I took my coat off, and I was sitting on that cooler next to the guy I was seeing, and we went underneath this light, and he leaned over and kissed me, and that's the last thing I remember. The next thing I remember, I opened my eyes, and I thought I was in the van, and it was crushed. The only thing I could move was my head, and when I looked this way, everything was dark, and I was like, what happened? And then when I looked this way, I saw the emergency lights and people running and talking and doing all this, and I started yelling, and there was boots right by the van, and this fireman leaned down, and he said, hold on, we're going to get you out, just hold on. So I looked back up, and I was out of it again. And the next thing I remember was a couple hours later waking up in the emergency room. But to tell you what happened, there was 8 of us in the van. and we were going down Interstate 80, and we were around Lincoln, Nebraska by this time, and the bridge that goes over the Platte River, which it was dark, I didn't see this, and I'm terrified of water. So when I researched to make this video and I saw this water, I kind of freaked out, because we got to the end of this bridge, and by this time Dawn was going too fast and the road was slick. It was February 5th, right around midnight. Negative 10 degrees outside. Snow and ice, everywhere, and bridges are slicker than the road, so he lost control, and we clipped the end of that bridge. And then the van, like I said, all the luggage was in the back, and at this time the only people that was awake was me and Dawn. Everybody else had went to sleep. And there was a guy laying on that luggage, and the van went up like this. Those doors, as he was losing control, the doors flew open, and the van went down like this, straight up, and the luggage fell out in that ditch along with that guy, and it crushed the doors up against the van. And then it went on its top, and it rolled, and it flipped, and it did all kinds of things all through this field while it was throwing out people. And as it was rolling and all this, the top of it separated from the rest of the van. It kind of went up like this, so there was a space between the windshield and the top of the van. Well, as it was flipping and doing all this, I was sitting on that cooler, and when it went back in that ditch, I went back, and that cooler came up and hit me in the face, and it knocked me out and busted my teeth, and it hit me pretty good. But, as it was going, I wasn't secured in anything, so I was going this way and that. And where it had separated in the windshield, that's where it tossed me out. Later on, I had scratches on my eyelids from the windshield as I went through it. Had little other scratches, but most of them was on my eyelids. But I landed on the ground, and other people did too. And Don, the driver, was laying on top of another guy, and the van went down and hit him. You could see his body imprint in the door. I saw it in pictures later. And then when it came back up, it came up where I was laying, and the metal by this time was all messed up and all this, and it grabbed a hold of me, and it dragged me 100 feet away from Don and Earl. And then it came to a stop with me pinned underneath it. My right ankle was up by my hip, and the axle was across my right leg, pinning me down. And the muffler was on top of me. And as I said, I had taken my coat off, and as we were being tossed and thrown around and all this, my shoes were thrown off of me. So I'm laying there in negative 10 degrees. That means it's 42 degrees below freezing. No coat, no shoes. And there was 8 people in the van, and when it stopped, when it come to a complete stop, there was 1 person left in it. There was 4 people pretty badly injured, and then the other 4, they had bumps and bruises and stuff. So they started looking for everybody. They found Don and Earl because they were laying right there, but they couldn't find me or another woman that was in there. So after I don't know how many minutes, I guess, because at this point I had went into shock, but I guess I started yelling, and they realized that I was underneath the van. So they walked over and turned it off because it had been running all this time. And they tried to figure out a way to get me out, but there was so much damage and so much metal around me that they couldn't get me out. So they ran to the road. By this time, they had found the other woman. She was off in a wooded area. The van had tossed her over there. But they ran to the road and they stopped a truck driver. And he used his CB to call for help. And they came out there and they was gathering everybody up. And they had to take this balloon type thing and stick it underneath the van and blow it up with air to raise up the van, and then take the jaws of life to cut me out. And this is when my PTSD kicked in, because the things that happened to me when I was a child, I have a problem with people touching me. I can't handle people touching me. So when they got me out, I was free. So them trying to help me, I fought them. And I fought them hard. But I was in shock, so I wasn't in my right mind, but they were touching me. And anyway, the wreck happened like at 5 minutes after midnight. It took them over an hour to get me out. So as I laid there in this freezing weather, I had frostbite on my toes and my hands, on my feet and my hands, and the fluid in my spine froze from laying pressed against the frozen ground. And I don't know what my body temperature was, but I know I was freezing. So I woke up, I came out of shock. I remember looking at the clock, it was 3:25 a.m. And they asked me my name, they asked me my mother's name, they asked me her phone number. And, I was like, what happened? And they were like, you were in a wreck. And we're concerned about your frostbite. We're concerned about the burn you got. And I was like, what burn? And they finally took the collar off my neck when they realized it wasn't broke or nothing. And I looked up and I was laying there, exposed, and I saw this. If you've never seen a burn, if they're really deep, they look green. And I saw this green streak on my chest, and I'm like, what is that? And I started to reach for it, and this nurse grabbed my arm. But that's when they told me I had been underneath the van and the muffler had burned me pretty good. But I forgot, I said I was fighting them. When I came to in the emergency room, I was surrounded by men, and mostly men, that were holding me down because I was fighting them so hard. And like I said, this was the PTSD because they were trying to help me, but I only talked to them for a few minutes, and then I went back into shock. And of course, which meant I went back to fighting them again, then trying to help me. Well, after they got my mom's phone number, they called her and they said, well, we have your daughter. She was in an accident. And in Nebraska, you have to be 19 to give permission to be seen and helped. So we need your permission to treat her. And she said, all right, you have it. And he said, okay, I'm going to tell you, we have already started treating her. We're concerned about the frostbite and the shock more than anything right now. He said the burn will have to be fixed with skin grafting and all that, but she keeps going into shock. So my mom had to prove to me, because I called her at 5:30. I do not remember it. But she said that I just kept telling her, Mom, I'm so cold. I am so cold. And she said you could hear my voice shivering, and she said it just made her cry because she could tell how cold I was. And I finally came out of the shock about 11 o'clock that next morning. And the nurses come in and were talking to me, and they didn't want to tell me too much until the doctor got there. And when he come in, he was, because I couldn't feel nothing from my waist down at this point. And he was sticking the needles in my toes and in my feet and my legs, and I couldn't feel anything. He said, well, okay, you might never walk again. We don't know the extent of the damage. Your spinal fluid freezing. We don't know the damage that it caused. Plus, you being dragged by the van. It did a little damage to your lower back. Plus, when my foot was up there around my hip, the axle, it didn't break the skin on my leg, but it broke, it cut the muscle underneath. And when you see the picture of where they took the skin off my leg, you can see a red line on my leg, and that's where the axle was. But it didn't break the skin, but it cut the muscle. It was from the pressure of that van. But anyway, he said, we don't know if you'll walk again. We don't know if you're going to lose some of your toes from the frostbite. He said, the burn is pretty extensive. It's pretty deep. It'll have to be fixed with skin grafting, and we can do that. There'll be months of recovery and all this stuff. And I'm just looking at him horrified, because I'm hundreds of miles away from home. I'm there by myself, and he's telling me all these wonderful things about you may never walk again and blah blah blah. And I just started getting upset and everything, and so he left, and the nurses were calming me down a little bit, and the news came on. And the first story was about the wreck I was in. And that's when I learned that Don, the driver, my boyfriend, had died. And they were talking about the ones who were hurt and still in the hospital and all this. And it was a little upsetting, to learn it that way. But I guess they couldn't tell me, I don't know. But anyway, so, and the thing, I was freezing at this point. When I came to, it was the main thing. I was so cold. I was just shivered, and they had layers and layers and layers of blankets on me. And I'll be honest, it actually took me months to warm up after this wreck, because it was so cold. But the doctor did tell me that the fact that they left the van running after the wreck saved my life, because it kept me warm long enough to save my life. But when they shut it off, it also saved my life, because the carbon monoxide was right there by my head. So, I was thrown out of that van. I was run over by it, dragged by it, burned by it, poisonous gases put in my face, and I walked away with no stitches, no broken bones. It did cause the 3rd and 4th degree burn, and I had small burns on this hand, because this one was pinned underneath me, but I had small burns on this hand and arm where I had fought the muffler trying to get it off of me, but they didn't need surgery. They were just 1st and 2nd degree. but the one on my chest was third and fourth, because fourth degree is when it burns into the bone, and it burned into my ribs. Uh, they had to file, when they did the skin grafting surgery, they had to file off the burn off my ribs. So yeah, if it had been lower, it would have burned into my liver and all that and killed me. And if it had been higher, it would have burned into my neck and face and would have killed me. So it was a miracle all the way around that there wasn't more damage and all this. And I made a deal with the doctor out there because, I talked to my mom, and at the time her job was transporting patients to doctors and hospitals and things like this. So she knew all these places, and she knew about the burn center at Wishart Hospital. That's what it was called then. And so she talked to the doctors about calling the burn center and having me transferred there instead of having all this done out in Nebraska and being out there for months. So I need to pause right now because I've lost my train of thought.